But don't despair. We know who wins in the end. So the Great Reset, of course, this book by Klaus Schwab came out right after COVID, in which they switched all of the data on their website, all the titles and headings to all of their website and all their literature that had already been talking about the Great Reset, to say that, okay, we finally have the unfreezing event that we've been waiting for to launch this Great Reset, to usher in the one world system. So he wrote a book in which he kind of lays it all out there. That basically the COVID-19 pandemic is a pretext for ushering in this one world economic, political, and religious system. Time magazine, in November of 2020, put this on their cover story. Now just look at the graphic there. They're literally rebuilding the world. That's exactly what Luciferianism is all about. Deconstructing reality and building it back according to their own agenda. So Klaus Schwab, of course, is the man behind the World Economic Forum. He founded it. And he was born in Ravensburg, Germany in 1938. So he was a child of Hitler's Germany. Ravensburg is in southern Germany. I looked it up. It's about 445 miles south of Berlin, just across the Switzerland border, and it's 100 miles north of Davos, Switzerland, about 90 miles to the northwest from another city in Switzerland. I can't remember which one, but one that we would have heard of. So his parents were heavily involved, and grandparents, in helping Hitler accomplish his thing, financing a lot of it, and that's the milieu in which he grew up. Brainwashing, control, fear, violence, propaganda, lies, eugenics, dehumanization, disinfection. It was a chilling, as we all know, the Holocaust, and grandiose vision of a new order. And now he's in his 80s now, but he's essentially dedicated his life to reinventing Hitler's dystopian nightmare, but with just different names. Now, back in Hitler's day, eugenics was considered science, and everybody knew we got to get rid of the feeble-minded. If you have the wrong color skin, or you walk with a limp, or you've got a broken arm, or malformed in some way, you're a feeble-minded person that needs to be, exterminated, and at the very least sterilized so you can't reproduce, right? Well, that became a little hard to stomach after Hitler's Holocaust, when pictures from photojournalists out of Auschwitz and other prison camps began to spread worldwide. So they still have the same satanic agenda of death, but they've just cast it in a different light. They're not as blatant about it. So his twisted satanic transhumanist vision, which we're about to talk about, involves things like a mixture of digital and analog life and infecting our bodies with smart dust, in which the police will be able to use to read our minds. They're using COVID-19 to bypass the democratic accountability, override opposition, use medical martial law to implement some of their more obvious restrictions. So Klaus Schwab likes to appear in his galactic garb, like what you see on the screen here, when making major announcements. I mean, he's not just satanic by his own admission; he's satanic by his looks. I mean, let's just be honest. This is a weird human being. Unsurprisingly, Schwab is connected to Jeffrey Epstein, like all others that are part of the Luciferian elite. Schwab is basically, right now, again, we're talking about walk-ons. I don't know how much longer we've got, but if I look at the landscape today, it's clear to me that he is the front man for the Luciferian New World Order agenda. And while the Luciferian conspiracy is not monolithic, he's definitely, along with his World Economic Forum, in the driver's seat. He's in the driver's seat. He's like sitting at mission control right now. But again, he doesn't have absolute authority. There are competing factions. There are other key players in this agenda. Bill Gates became a fixture at the World Economic Forum starting in 1996. Henry Kissinger is also a very influential person in the history of the World Economic Forum, as was the late David Rockefeller. And Al Gore is very heavily involved in the World Economic Forum. I mean, again, it reads like a who's who of key world figures today that are a part of this group. I'm not suggesting that these, 5 that you see on the screen are the most significant ones. These are just names that you would know, and they all play a huge, huge role. So the World Economic Forum has essentially become like the COVID response headquarters. Sometimes the media wants to make us think that well-intentioned, smart medical doctors are getting together and just wringing their hands over how to stop this deadly virus that 99.73% of people survive. That's not what's happening at all. The World Economic Forum, which has tens of thousands of people on the payroll involved in this, are the ones dictating the agenda, and it's trickling down. And most medical doctors don't even know it. And I don't want to get too far afield of our topic tonight, because we'll talk more about that next week. But at their annual meetings in January in Davos every year, they often have meditation sessions called mindfulness periods, in which they try to imagine a better world free from overpopulation. Let's just all, sit around and meditate in a satanic way and try to think of ways we can kill people. That's what they're doing at these sessions. He said the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. By the way, all of the big pharma corporations, including the ones that are producing the COVID vaccinations globally, are listed as key partners on the World Economic Forum site. So I'm going to be giving you a lot of quotes throughout the night from Klaus Schwab himself, but here's the first. At the time of writing, and he's talking about the writing of the book COVID-19, The Great Reset. At the time of writing, the pandemic continues to worsen globally. Many of us are pondering when things will return to normal. The short response is never. Nothing will ever return, this is his words, to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis. See, they thought the world was broken because of its national sovereignty, its nationalism, its freedoms, people being free to get in their car and drive without paying taxes and being arrested for their carbon footprint. All of that we lived in a broken world. And here they are riding in on their black horses to save the world from these problems. Prior to the crisis, because the coronavirus pandemic marks a fundamental inflection point in our global trajectory. He said some analysts call it a major bifurcation. Others refer to a deep crisis, watch this, these are his words, of biblical proportions. But the essence remains the same. The world as we knew it in the early months of 2020 is no more, dissolved in the context of the pandemic. Now this is where he gets back to what the New York Times and the Financial Times of the UK suggested. Radical changes of such consequence are coming, such that some pundits have referred to a before coronavirus, BC, and an after coronavirus, AC era. We will continue to be surprised by both the rapidity and unexpected nature of these changes. I mean, they're warning you what's coming. It's coming significantly and it's coming fast. As they conflate with each other, they will provide second, third, fourth, and more order consequences, cascading effects, and unforeseen outcomes. In his earlier book, written in 2017, called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, he says, the Fourth Industrial Revolution will affect the very essence of our human experience. It's basically a techno-tyranny. They call it sometimes 4IR. This is the book that he was referring to there. So when you see experts and so-called talking heads on TV talking about 4IR, they're talking about this fourth industrial revolution. What they're saying is basically during the Industrial Revolution that changed our world back in the 17th, 18th centuries, that was a world-changing time. It's happening again, only in a much grander scale. Now, they've mapped it all out. They have a comprehensive blueprint that was, again, this was already on their website long before we became aware of COVID, even though COVID was talked about for at least 10 years by the Rockefeller Foundation. So you can check that out, some of the things they're talking about. But he says, to achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. So here's a short promotional video from the World Economic Forum website. I think it's about 90 seconds. And it talks about their top 8 priorities as part of the UN Agenda 2030, things they want to see accomplished in the next 8 years. And so I want you just to watch this. So that last one, checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. In other words, democracies, they may have their place, but we need to hold them in check. They need to be accountable to really some higher governmental global authority. The very first one of the 8 points on their own website. What they're telling you is you will own nothing and you will like it. I saw a seminar in my research for this over the last 2 weeks by a lady from the World Economic Forum giving a speech at one of their many symposiums around the world on this very point. And she was literally mocking those who thought they needed to own things. It was very condescending. It was like, why do you need to own anything? Why do you need to own this or to own that or to own this? Right? Why can't you just lease it? She said. Why do you need to own anything? So, and they're promoting this great reset all the way down to the youngest children in our government schools and in other places, obviously, in the world. Here is a short little bit that is used for kids to kind of help promote the Great Reset. And what a wonderful thing it is. Such a great thing. Your kids should be really excited about this, the Great Reset.
Hello, everybody. It is I, your cute and adorable Paul Grover, with a message for listeners of the Great Reset. Well, you are in luck because I know a thing or two about resetting. I reset my alarm clock every morning. But you are talking about resetting the entire world.
You are talking about resetting the entire world. This is getting into the minds of our children. The Great Reset is being advanced as a necessary response to an alleged global pandemic. And they're talking about it in terms of global governance, biosecurity, the new normal, the New Deal for nature, or as I mentioned, the fourth industrial revolution. Schwab basically sits at the center of this matrix like a spider in the middle of a giant spider web. And his aim, and the World Economic Forum's aim, is to replace democracy with global governance, a group of hand-picked, unelected individuals whose duty is not to serve the public, but to impose the rule of the Luciferian elite on the public with as little interference from the rest of us as possible. Now, before we go even deeper down this rabbit hole, I want to pause and take a look at the global governance or human government from God's perspective, God's plan of the ages. Where does human government fit into this? And so let me kind of put this in perspective. If you go back to Genesis 1, you see essentially God's priority of relationships. And it starts, obviously, with man-God. So the first thing they're trying to do is absolutely destroy your personal relationship with God. They're trying to turn you into gods, right? And we're going to talk more about that in a moment when we talk about transhumanism. But that's the number one priority. Above all else, it's our relationship with God. If you don't know God, if you remain separated from Him, born dead in your trespasses and sins, you need to restore that relationship with Him, which can only be done by accepting the free gift of eternal life paid for by the blood of Christ. And you accept that by faith. It's a matter of trusting in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who died and rose again for your sins. And that restores that relationship. But even as believers, that's our top priority. Our top priority. And then the second one, in the order of creation, is husband-wife. And what are they trying to do? Completely destroy marriage. Make a mockery of it at every turn, right? Destroying gender, the gender surrender movement. And then the third order is parent-child. And what are they doing with that? They're trying to rip children away from their parents. Take away parents' rights over their children. It takes a village, the nanny state. The government can tell you what to do. And in many countries already, and it's coming here, they've already talked about it, they are vaccinating and giving drugs to your children without you even knowing it. Right? And then the fourth, for our purposes, this is what we're going to talk about next, is citizen government. That didn't come along until after the flood. Right? And by the way, when naive, frankly, really dumb Christians suggest today that we have to obey whatever the government says, they're skipping 3 levels of God's priority that take precedent over that. And by the way, I did last week an interview on Christian Underground News Network on does Romans 13 teach that we must obey the government? And that's still out there on the Not By Works website on the podcast. If you just search for it, it was July 13th was the date. But the Bible has a lot to say about human government and how it fits in God's plan of the ages, right? And it kind of goes on a journey. It starts with globalism, and then it shifts into nationalism and different individual countries. But then it comes back full circle again to globalism, right? So it starts in Genesis with God saying to Adam and Eve, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion. Have dominion over every living thing that moves on the earth. There were no countries and nations in the garden. It was a one-world global system. And Adam and Eve were accountable directly to God, right? It was globalism. But of course, as we move along in time, we see that it shifted into more of a nationalist approach. So we have a lot happening in the early stages of creation. And as we just talked about a couple of weeks ago at our Creationism Conference, we believe the Bible teaches unequivocally, unapologetically, and unambiguously a young earth, right? And so if you look at just the biblical narrative and the timeline from creation in Genesis, and you go all the way up through Genesis 6 and 7, you find that the flood occurred basically 1,656 years after creation.